Okay, so the last video was cut off again. I don't remember exactly what I was saying. So, no sovereign state can ever be out of the state of nature. So, even though Sweden and Cuba and the United States and Canada and Mexico and England and China are all sovereign nations, and within their boundaries, they can be in a state of peace. And Hobbes would say that all of those are in a state of peace, that with each other, they never can be. Because the only way to be in a state of peace between you and someone else who has an equal opportunity of taking you down, even if their military isn't as strong as the United States, they can use stealth. They can team up with 27 other countries and take down the United States, believe me. And they can take us down financially by getting us into debt or whatever it is. There's always a way to take us down in body or mind. So when you're dealing with people or sovereign nations who are equal to you in the regard of survival, in the ability to take you down, then you can never be in anything but war unless there is someone above you. There's some sovereign nation, something like the UN or whatever, that is above you. And that doesn't really work. And we've tried it, and it just doesn't work. So, as Hobbes, they didn't have the UN when Hobbes was writing, but if he knew about that and saw it today, he would say, yeah, I'm not surprised that this isn't working. Because sovereigns are different than the citizens. They don't make the same covenant as we do. But we'll see about all that shortly. But that's why that they don't make a covenant with each other. And they never can, or they wouldn't be sovereigns. So we'll see how that works in a minute. Go to then page 38, and from the very top of page 38 on the left-hand column, if you go down maybe 7 lines, it's consequent also in the same condition, he's talking about the state of war still, that there is no propriety, no dominion, no mine and thine, mine and yours, distinct, but only that to be every man's that he can get, and for so long as he can keep it. What he's saying here is that there's no property in the state of nature. There's nothing that is legitimately owned by me. It's owned by me for if I can get it, and for as long as I can keep it. And as soon as you steal it from me, like my wife, then she belongs to you. She never was owned by me to begin with. She's owned by whichever man is able to take her at that time. And that's it. And I say here, let's see. So there's no property in the state of nature, which is where I say it. And then if you go to the right-hand column, the first full paragraph that begins, and because the condition of man, etc., go down 10 lines or so. It followeth that in such a condition, this is still the state of war, every man has a right to everything, even to one another's body. And therefore, as long as his natural right of every man to everything endureth, there can be no security to any man. What he's saying there is that I have a right, in the state of nature, I have a right to your body. If it helps me to survive, I have the right to take it from you. I have the right to rape you. I have the right to kill your body. I have the right to take it as my slave. I have the right to dominate it. I have the right to do anything I want. And if that means torturing you to set an example in order to have that glory that's one of the 3 principal causes of quarrel, then I have the right to do that. I have the right to torture the hell out of you if it will allow me to better survive. And having that kind of glory, that reputation as being someone scary and brutal and intimidating, which will keep other men from even trying to come near me, that conduces to my survival. If it conduces to my survival, using your body in that horrible way, I have the right to do it in the state of nature. Anything that allows me to survive is my right to do in the state of nature. This is a terrible place. So, all those anarchists and extremist libertarians who are not interested in sacrificing rights, in sacrificing these freedoms to do these kinds of things, to do whatever I want, because I should get to do whatever I want, and there should be no rules, no government should ever impede me from doing what I want. People who think that, Hobbes would say, you don't know what you're talking about. You do not get to even survive if we don't have rules. Human nature will not allow it. Anybody who thinks that human nature is sweet and compassionate and giving is really fooling himself. As Hobbes says, the only reason that we think that is because we're thinking about human nature from inside society. When we've been taught that compassion and so forth are good things, you are judging human nature based on what you've experienced and learned in a civil society. But that's not human nature. We are not naturally made to be in a society. We are naturally made to be selfish and to take whatever is required for our survival. So if you think that having more freedoms is the best route to survival, and you give them to everybody, you're giving all these freedoms to people, to creatures that by their very natures are not going to be compassionate with them and are going to be out for themselves. And you run the real risk then that they will turn those freedoms on you. And people do that all the time. In a civil society, they do that to each other. They do horrible, disgusting things. And Hobbes says, yeah, I know. That's the nature of man. The only way for us to have peaceful living is to sacrifice, in particular, the freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want to. You do not get to just have any old freedom you want just because you're human. In fact, it's because you're human that you don't get those freedoms in a civil society. They do not conduce to your own survival. If you give everybody else those freedoms, they will not use them benevolently. We don't give everybody those freedoms, and they still are malicious and cruel in ways that are unprecedented, unfathomable to other human beings, to animals. The things that we do are horrible. And Hobbes doesn't trust human beings with those kinds of freedoms to do whatever they want whenever the inclination takes them. I don't even trust my own inclinations, and I'm a learned human being, very deeply assimilated into a moral system. And I treat my own inclinations, my own desires many times as extremely suspect. Most people don't even do that. And they should. And this is why when we go out, We carry mace, or we carry guns, because we know that human beings aren't to be trusted. But you think it's a great idea to just take away the rules and the punishments for behavior? Yeah, you can live in that society. I'm not going to join you. I'll stay over here. We'll see how long you guys last. Because history has shown us that those kinds of societies have ever lasted or triumphed. I'm talking about something like no rules, no law, no government. I don't want to live with human beings when they don't have any fear of reprisal. Now, the last paragraph on the left-hand column, page 38, prior to the new chapter, that starts, the passions that incline men to peace are fear of death, desire of such things as are necessary to commodious living, and a hope by their industry to obtain them. And reason suggests convenient articles of peace, etc., etc. So, as I say here, there are both passions and reasons push men to realize that if my end goal is to survive, and I live in a state of war in which my survival is consistently threatened, then the most efficient thing to do, the most practical, the wisest, the most rational thing to do is not to be in a state of war. Because I'm afraid of death, and I want to survive. War is the least efficient way to survive. Peace is the most efficient way to survive. And peace only occurs when we have some kind of central power that will dole out punishments for bad behavior, a moral system. Hobbes is okay with religion insofar as it keeps the peace. He wasn't religious. He wasn't interested in religion as something real and true. It was a social institution that was created for one end goal only, to keep the peace. He doesn't really think that there's a real God, or that a real God doles out real punishments. And anyway, none of that stuff matters, because unless you have a sovereign putting that kind of fear into you, you don't know about it, you don't care about it, it doesn't make a difference. Religion, morality are only interesting and important insofar as they keep the peace in a civil society. And keeping the peace is only interesting insofar as it conduces to survival. So that is all that matters in the state of nature, and then into the civil society. And this is why, as we'll see, the sovereign doesn't have many constraints on his behavior. First, so this new chapter, the first thing that he begins with is the right of nature. A man has the innate right to do anything for his own survival, and in addition to this, well, that's what he says at the very beginning of this new chapter. The right of nature is the liberty, freedom, each man has to use his own power for the preservation of his own nature, and consequently, doing anything that he shall conceive to be the aptest means thereunto. So the right of nature is my freedom to do anything I need to do to survive. This right, this is very important, and if you write on this question about the right of nature and the laws of nature and stuff, you have to say this. If you do not say this, I will mark you down. If you do not say this, I will mark you down. If you do not say this, I will mark you down. The right of nature is never given up. In a state of nature or in a civil society, the right of nature is never given up. You never give up the right of nature. You never give up the right of nature. You never give up the right of nature. You cannot give it up biologically, because we come equipped as biological organisms with the right of nature. The right of nature is just that I will fight for my own survival. This is natural. This is biological. A tree will fight for its own survival by growing toward the sun. Any animal, any bacteria, anything, and certainly a human being, will fight for its own survival. If you back a living creature into a corner, physically or metaphorically, it will fight to survive. You cannot give that up. It wasn't your choice to have it. You don't make a conscious decision to fight for your survival. It is innate, it is instinctual that you fight back when your survival is threatened. Even if you just perceive it to be, you will fight back. Therefore, you cannot give it up. And as he says, if you flip to page 42, the second full paragraph on the left-hand column, a covenant not to defend myself from force by force is always void. For, as I have showed before, no man can transfer or lay down his right to save himself from death, wounds, or imprisonment. Let's see. Well, whatever. It doesn't matter what the sovereign asks of you. If he says you need to lay down, you need to sacrifice this one particular right that you have. That is the right to defend your life. Even if I, the sovereign, send a military to come and take you away, you have to be willing to not fight back. If you say, okay, yes, let's shake on it. I'm willing not to fight you in this, sovereign. That contract is void. It's immediately void because it is our natural inclination as biological organisms to fight for our survival. You cannot choose. It is not a choice. So you cannot choose to give it up. You cannot give away that right. You must make this clear in your papers if you write on this topic. The right of nature is always yours because it is natural. Remember that. Now, I've renamed the next three things the laws of nature. He calls them... Oh, I'm on the wrong page. I knew there was something wrong. He calls them a law of nature, the fundamental law of nature, and the second law of nature. Okay, fine. I renamed them to a law of nature in general, which is this idea will describe any law of nature. If there were 52 laws of nature, it would describe every single one of those 52. So a law of nature in general describes all laws of nature. Then I just, instead of calling it the fundamental law, I just called it the first law and the second law. So hopefully that's easier. But note that they correspond to what he says. Okay, so on page 38, left-hand column, the last paragraph at the bottom that begins, a law of nature is a precept or general rule found out by reason. That is what I am calling in my notes a law of nature in general. And I've put a definition, a rule found out by reason that forbids a man to do anything that is destructive to his life. It's important that it's found out by reason. The right of nature is not found out by reason. You don't find it out. It's just a part of you. When someone is trying to hurt you, you fight back. You don't decide to fight back. You don't think it through. You just do it. As soon as someone is trying to hurt you, you immediately put your hands in front of your face or whatever it is. But you fight back in some way. You try to preserve your life. The laws of nature are not like that. They come to us after we've thought for a minute. And we say, okay, wait a minute. So if my end goal is survival, then that means this behavior, which is not at all conducive to my survival, is actually destructive to my life. Why the hell am I doing it? Wait a minute. So, eating McDonald's every day and drinking beer and stuff, probably not conducive to my survival. Why am I doing this now? It's not immediately evident that this is, as it were, an attack on your life, those kinds of behaviors, because they have perhaps more far-reaching consequences than a guy who's coming at you with a knife immediately. So you don't immediately think, I need to fight back against this. And you're choosing to eat the McDonald's or to drink the whatever all the time or be unhealthy in myriad ways. So you figure it out after the fact that, wait a minute, my end goal here is a couple of things, and these kind of behaviors don't conduce to survival or staying fit or healthy or, whatever. Or, as I said in the discussion, being jealous and angry and yelling and name-calling is not actually conducive to the survival of my relationship with my mother or my significant other or my sister. So why am I acting like that? Maybe that's not reasonable. But those kinds of behaviors aren't an immediate attack on your life. So the right of nature doesn't apply in the same way. A law of nature does. You figure out by reason that those kinds of behaviors aren't conducive to survival. So you figure out that you need to curb them. And it's difficult. We know we shouldn't be eating McDonald's every day. I should hope that nobody here thinks that it's okay to do that somehow this is good in any way. But we still do it. We eat terribly. And it doesn't even have to be McDonald's. I mean, eating the bananas and the corn that I eat from the grocery store is already wreaking havoc on my body because of what human beings have done to them. But we don't immediately realize that stuff. So I have to figure out that I need to stop it. Even though it is an attack on me. It's an attack on my life, but I'm choosing it. Not in the same way that the guy with the knife is in the state of nature who's coming up behind me to kill me and take my stuff is choosing it. I'm choosing to put that crap into my body. So I have to choose to stop because rationally I figure out, you know what, this actually isn't very good to be doing. I probably should change my diet somewhat. See how it's different? Okay. So the main thing that we figure out, as I've written here in the notes, is that war is destructive to my life. So we can't rationally remain in a state of war. War is the natural, as Hobbes sees it. It's what we do naturally, because as he sees it, we're not social creatures. I don't agree with that at all, that aspect. But even social creatures can still be at war. And he sees that naturally we are at war, because we're all selfish. So we have to realize, after we think about it a little bit, that being at war doesn't make the most sense in the achievement of our end goals. So we need to seek peace. So we get the first and second laws of nature. First one, and by the way, it's easy to find because on the right-hand column on page 38, the first and second laws of nature are those two sections that are italicized. So the first one, every man should push for peace in order to survive. If he can't, he must do anything, that is, go back to war, to maintain his survival. Now, if you write on the laws of nature the question that asks you about them, you have to say this. I will mark you down if you don't say this. You need to explain the three laws of nature we're talking about. A law of nature in general, the first law of nature, the second law of nature. The first law of nature has two parts. The first part is the first law of nature itself. Every man should endeavor peace. We know that because of the law of nature in general, which is that a man is forbidden to do anything destructive of his life. War is destructive of his life. Therefore, the only rational thing to do is to endeavor peace. So the first law of nature is that you must endeavor peace. But that means you have to say, hey guys, wait, okay, I know we're all fighting and we're all enemies, but think about it for a minute. Just think. We all want to survive, right? I know you guys want to as much as I do, right? Right? Okay, we're on the same team. I know, okay. You all agree. Don't you think that maybe if we just, like, made a rule to just leave each other alone, kind of, and not hurt each other, that then maybe we would be more likely to survive? And maybe we could, like, get some guy to, like, be the king or something, and then if we go back on the word not to hurt each other, maybe he'll, put us in jail for a while, or like in timeout or something, and we'll get in trouble, and then we'll have this real incentive not to do it and stuff. And some guys say, yeah, that sounds okay, and other guys say, no, I'm not doing that. I am not making any agreement with you. In fact, you're doing this, you're saying all this because you've got somebody else. You're going to go try and steal my wives behind my back while I'm listening to you talk. I'm not doing this. I'm not agreeing. You say, okay, it's a good idea, but if you're not going to agree to it, then screw you. I'm getting the hell out of here because you guys are going to hurt me. So forget it. So, every man should endeavor peace as far as he can. He should bring up the idea and try to be peaceful. But if nobody else is going to agree with him, then he needs to fall back and go back to the right of nature. So, the first law of nature has two parts. The first part is the law of nature. The second part is the right of nature. You have to say that. So I will expect that if you write on the question about the laws of nature, that you will also define the right of nature in your second paragraph. In your second body paragraph. So 5 paragraphs. Introduction. Law of nature in general. First law of nature, which includes in that paragraph a discussion of the right of nature, and that it never is ever given up. The second law of nature, conclusion. 5 paragraph essay. Easy. Okay? So I will expect to see that. And in fact, Hobbes says that after the italicized portion, he says the first branch of which rule contains the first and fundamental law of nature, which is to seek peace and follow it. The second branch of that law is the sum of the right of nature, which is by all means that we can to defend ourselves. If you cannot get everybody else to be on your team about peace, then you better fall back and go back to war. Because if you say, okay, well, you guys don't agree, I'm sorry, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to be peaceful. I'm not going to strike first. I'll leave you all alone. And I'll just be really nice and sweet over here. What's going to happen? They didn't agree to do the same thing, so they're just going to kill you immediately and take your stuff. So you cannot make an agreement with other men to endeavor peace and institute a sovereign if they don't also agree. Everybody has to be on the same team. Then, the second law of nature. So if you put that forth, if you say, hey guys, I got it. It's totally destructive of our lives, and we all want to survive. It's destructive to stay at war. So let's have peace. How about we do that instead? And they say, yeah, you're right. Okay, good idea. Okay, we'll do it. What should we do? How do we do that? The second law of nature comes into play then. You say, okay, how do we endeavor peace? How do we become peaceful and stop being at war? I got it. Let's make an agreement. When everybody else is willing, you guys have to be willing too, to sacrifice some of our freedoms, as long as everybody's willing to sacrifice the same freedoms. Specifically, the freedom to do whatever I want to, whenever I want to do it. That's the freedom I sacrifice. In other words, anarchy. So that's the way to endeavor peace. You have to be willing to sacrifice some freedoms. Which means that in a civil society, you have to be willing to sacrifice your freedoms. And what you get out of that is the ability to be human, to live in a culture with art and progress and academia and intellectual challenges and a family and love and all of the things that human beings find so important. But that only happens because we have agreed that we are going to generally abide by some kind of rules and a system, and that not everything goes. It's not okay that people just do whatever they want whenever they want to. And we need to have real laws and rules. And if you don't want to have that, you can go live in the state of nature, but I'm not going to go live with you. I'm going to stay here. Because I would prefer to go to school and learn things and have friendships. If you don't care about those things, fine. I feel sorry for you. But I don't want to live in a place where there are no rules. So, Hobbes puts forth a pretty bleak picture of the kind of world that so many people, strangely enough to me, think is the world we should live in. I don't really understand that, but it's very weird to me. I'm not gonna, there's a bunch here about the covenant and contracts and things. Keep this much in mind, that this is what happens when you make this agreement with all the other people. You guys say, okay, we agree to give up this particular freedom. The freedom to do whatever we want whenever we want to. And we're going to institute this particular sovereign, this one guy. And Hobbes thinks that the best sovereign is not a parliament or a congress and has these checks and balances like we do in our political system. It's some kind of monarchy or tyranny. It's one guy. If you have 5 guys, or in terms of our Congress and our House of Representatives, I mean, we have tons of people involved, and they don't ever agree on anything, and they're at war with each other, let alone what happens to our actual country, our sovereign nation. All of our leaders are at war. They can't agree. So what happens to us? So Hobbes says, look, you need just one guy making the rules. And this is important, and you need to be able to understand this. We make a covenant with each other not to kill each other and so forth, as long as you don't kill me. And we make a covenant with the sovereign. We will do whatever you say as long as you keep the peace. The sovereign, however, does not make a covenant with us. He does not have to abide by the rules that he lays down for us. He lays down a moral system. He might lay down a religion. He lays down traffic laws. Whatever he does for us so that we can all live together. He does not make a covenant to abide by all of those things. He is the one man who does not lay down his right to do whatever he wants. He is bound by one thing only, and that is to keep the peace. If keeping the peace for this particular sovereign means that he kills a bunch of people, if that keeps the peace, then that keeps the peace, and he is damn well allowed to do it. There is only one time when it is justifiable to overthrow for the people to overthrow a sovereign. it is if he is not keeping the peace. People will overthrow sovereigns unjustifiably because they think that he's just being tyrannical, but if he was keeping the peace and he was doing his duty, that was all that he agreed to. He didn't agree to do his duty kindly or with respect for all citizens. He didn't agree to that. He only agreed to put the citizens in a position to be able to get from point A to point B in a relatively safe manner, to take them out of a state of war. That's all that he agreed to. As long as he did that, he did his duty. Sometimes sovereigns will be overthrown because of another sovereign nation coming in and invading, and that's whatever. That will always happen, and that's okay, because two sovereign nations are never brothers. They never have fraternity. They will always be at war. So when one sovereign nation invades another, that's normal, that's to be expected. All sovereign nations are always in a state of perpetual war. But the people, the citizens within a sovereign nation are not in a state of war. They're supposed to be in a state of peace because they're following the rules instituted by the sovereign. If the sovereign screws up and doesn't institute rules properly or whatever he does, and he doesn't keep the peace among the people, then and only then can they justifiably overthrow him. Otherwise, any kind of overthrowing of the sovereign is unjustified. So it doesn't matter that Bill Clinton had sex with somebody and did this and that. That has nothing to do with keeping the peace. So trying to impeach him or anything is completely unjustifiable for Hobbes. The sovereign can do whatever the hell he wants, so long as he keeps the peace. And our moral indignation about him having sex out of wedlock is not a compelling argument for him not keeping the peace. He did not deserve in any way to be reprimanded for that, according to Hobbes. So, remember for Hobbes that the greatest thing is survival. That is what he sees as our greatest end goal. So, if the sovereign allows for us to pursue that greatest end goal, it's a good sovereign. And that's what he says. So, again, if you have any questions, email, and I'll try to fill in the blanks. All right? Good luck on your papers, guys.